suppose you could say that I'm not the best organised gardener in the whole world, because at bulb planting time in the autumn, I can never remember where I need the colour in the spring. So one way of getting over it is to plant the bulbs up into big pots and to plant them out when they're actually in flower. Now, I like to plant them too in large drifts so that you get a really good show of colour. Now, with bulbs like these Darwins or cottage tulips, you can actually plant them straight into the soil, because they'll keep coming back year after year for quite a few years. But with the others, or if you want to use them just for bedding, you can plant them straight in the pots, and then when they finish flowering, just hoik them out and plant up with something else. But the one thing you must remember with all bulbs is that when they finish flowering, you must let the foliage die down naturally. Give them a feed as well, and that will enable them to build up the bulb for the following year. Well, of course, I suppose the expert tulip growers in the whole world are the Dutch, and we've got lots more tulips in the programme for you today, when Anthony Henn brings us the first of his reports on the Dutch flower industry, with a visit to the fabulous display of bulbs at Keukenhof in Holland. And Stephen Lacey goes to Cornwall to show us some splendid magnolias in all their spring glory. Now, just in front of my tulips is a lovely corydallis called Pear David, which was named after a botanising priest. And you'll appreciate that many plants in gardens are named after perhaps the plant hunter who found them, or interested botanists or gardeners. And behind those names are very often interesting people and fascinating stories. Well, Gay Search has been hunting one out in North London.
This is Myddleton House in Enfield. And you don't have to hunt too hard through the borders for clues to the identity of the man who created this quite extraordinary garden. There's the lesser periwinkle, Bowles blue, Pulmonaria, Bowles red, and that lovely velvety pansy, Viola Bowles black. The Bowles in question is the plantsman E.A. Bowles, who was born in this house and for 70 years gardened in quite magnificent style until his death in 1954. The third son of a very wealthy family, and so freed from the need to earn a living, Edward Augustus, or Mr. Gussie as he was known, was able to divide his life between good works and gardening. To the many underprivileged boys of the area, the Bowles boys, who got an education at the night school he ran for them, he was known and loved for his philanthropy. But to the world of horticulture, he is best known as a plant hunter and passionate collector of rare plants, an expert breeder of crocuses, a talented botanical artist and garden writer, and, of course, a great gardener. After his death, the remarkable garden that Bowles had created became neglected and overgrown. But for the last 12 years, the Lee Valley Regional Park Authority has been working on a programme of restoration, the last 6 of them under the enthusiastic eye of head gardener Christine Barker.
He wanted to create his own alpine meadow here at Myddleton. He originally planted 50 bulbs.
Just 50?
Yeah, which he bowled over on and then planted where they fell. And these have naturalised to the thousands of bulbs that we've got today.
So what other plants named after Bowles have you got in the garden?
Well, there's a few. There's a Risamum Bowles mauve, the perennial wallflower. I think it's the most famous of Bowles's plants, but it's one that he actually didn't like.
Oh, why not?
I wouldn't have in the garden, because I don't know if you noticed, it doesn't hold its colour true. The purple flowers are often streaked with white, and because it didn't hold a true colour, Bowles was not impressed by it, and yet somehow it has got his name. There's Crocus E.A. Bowles, which was he used to, as a plantsman, be sent or would order from vast numbers of nurseries around the world. And this was sent from Holland, a batch of 5 seedlings. And in amongst them was this wonderful buttercup yellow one with brown streakings, which he sent back admiring. And that was how it came to bear his name. And the Bowles black pansy, he didn't breed it or anything. He just liked it so much that he gave it away to so many people. Oh, this is the black pansy I got from Bowles, and that's how come it became Bowles black. He wasn't concerned with being capability brown and creating these marvellous sweeps of colour and that. It was the plants that mattered to him, his people.
You may remember that at the beginning of the season I sowed a whole load of seeds into modules and brought them on in the cold frame, and here they are. They haven't done at all badly. For my £30 worth of seed I've got over 1,000 plants, and I reckon that's pretty good value for money. Some of them did much better than others. I've got, for example, 300 pinks, but the delphiniums didn't do nearly as well. And what I want to do now is to plant most of them out straight out of the modules, because quite obviously that's very much cheaper. And with little plants like these lupins, for example, they'll be fine. Though some of the smaller ones, like the Nymphophias, will have to be potted up and grown on until they're about the size of these others, which are ones that I raised from seed collected from my own plants last year. Now, if you haven't raised seeds in modules this year, don't forget that you can still sow them outside, direct into the soil now, just as successfully, and of course, even cheaper. Well, I'm going to have miles too many plants here, quite obviously, so I shall use any spares that I've got as swaps, particularly with my friend Nick Ray. So I reckon that's probably the best 30 quid I ever spent. It'll be interesting to see what the border looks like at the end of the season, when I expect it to be quite mature.
There's a wonderful primeval atmosphere to this Cornish swamp, with its gunra rising reptile-like from the mud, and this self-sown colony of skunk cabbages emitting a sour, animal-like smell. And strangely, this is a very appropriate setting to come and look at a favourite group of garden plants, the magnolias. Magnolias have been around a very long time, their ancestors dating back 100 million years, to the days before there were even bees and butterflies to pollinate them. The job was done by beetles, and here they still are today, pollinator and pollinated, almost unchanged after all these years. And the plant's still with a scent designed to lure in the beetle, a sort of fermenting fruit cocktail. All the spring flowering magnolias come from the forests of Asia, and they started entering our gardens in the late 18th and 19th centuries with a terrific flurry in the early decades of this century from China, collected by some of the great plant hunters like E.H. Wilson and George Forrest. The garden here at Chiverton has one of the best collections in the country, and many of the larger plants have been propagated from some of those original introductions.
My father started in 1929, and from 1944 to 1959, when he died, he planted about 20 or 30 of the big tree magnolias, which had been raised from seed at Keukenhof from the original plants introduced by Wilson and Forrest.
But the garden does offer absolutely ideal conditions for magnolias, doesn't it?
On the whole, we are very lucky, yes, we seem to be able to give them the conditions they enjoy. Shelter, I think moisture too, I think they need. We are completely sort of green, or like what we use no fertiliser at all on any of our plants.
Even at the planting stage, you
Not
don't...
even the planting stage, no.
Right, so they're just growing.
We give them a good hole. Well, I was brought up that you paid a shilling for the plant and a pound for the hole.
So why don't you see tree magnolias all over the country? Well, the reason is there's a snag. They can take an inordinate amount of time to start flowering. 20, even 30 years isn't unusual, which naturally puts most people off. But some sterling work has been done in the latter half of this century in various parts of the world to hybridise them with some other magnolias which flower at an earlier stage of their life. And the result is hybrids like this, Keukenhof Surprise, raised in Cornwall in the 1950s, which flowers at about 6 or 7 years of age. In California, Todd Gresham raised an amazing 16,000 hybrid seedlings, which a number of very good forms have been selected. This is one of the best, Manchu Fan, which started flowering here after 7 years. And this is Star Wars, raised and named in New Zealand in the 1970s, which flowered at Chiverton at the age of just 4. But a magnolia almost all of us can accommodate. is this one, the star magnolia, stellata. For centuries, the Japanese have grown them as pot plants to bring indoors in spring, not least for the spicy scent. But growing magnolias in pots is fraught with danger of summer drought and particularly of winter frost damage. From Magnolia stellata has descended an excellent group of hybrids under the name of Magnolia loebneri, after Max Loebner, who described himself as a garden inspector from Dresden. Nigel Holman considers this one the pick of the pack. Leonard Messel says it's the most frost-proof of all his magnolias and would be his #1 choice for the small garden. But of course, by far the best-known magnolia is this, Magnolia soulangiana, hybridised in France in the early 19th century. In fact, by one of Napoleon's cavalry officers, Monsieur Soulange Baudin, who, after Waterloo, in his own words, swapped his sword for cabbages. And this is the result, a superb magnolia with very weatherproof flowers, doing well on most garden soils, and with flowers in a range of pink and white colours. But it's the sheer variety of magnolias that's so impressive in this garden, from the shrubs to the great trees, which can take half a lifetime to start flowering. Nigel Holman's been extremely lucky to have had his parents planting for him.
That's the only way, really, if you want to see your magnolias flower, is to have a father who planted before you.
Yes.
Well, it's generation following generation.
And you're doing the same now for...
Oh yes, I'm planting a lot of plants which I doubt whether I'll see flower. But I hope someone, and hope a member of my family will enjoy them in the future.
And is it really that absurd for the rest of us to think like that too? Whoever's living in our houses after us. To leave something behind for the landscape, a piece of prehistory for future generations. Something like this.
Well, as Stephen pointed out, the one thing that magnolias mustn't do is dry out. But it does seem that we gardeners are going to have some problems this year with watering. Already some areas have got hosepipe bans and in others it's threatened. It all seems a bit unfair, really, because gardeners, in fact, only use about 2% of domestic water. But unfair or not, it is a fact of life. So we must be turning our minds now to conserving water. First of all, any sort of bulky organic matter will help to retain moisture. So always keep a couple of compost bins going, and then make sure that only your cultivated plants get the water by hoeing out all the weeds while they're still quite small. And then, of course, you can prevent them from coming through by mulching. And on the allotments, there are plenty of ways that you can do it. First of all, you could use black polythene, like I've used in between my runner bean canes. But even better, I think, is this stuff. This actually lets the water through. It's exactly the same as the white horticultural fleece that we use for protecting plants, except it's a bit heavier and it's black, of course, so it will help to retain the moisture and stop the weeds coming through as well. Now, that stuff is quite cheap, but even cheaper is newspaper. And what you do with that is simply to rake a little bit of soil out of the way first, and then put about 3 layers of newspaper down, like that, and then just cover up with a thin layer of soil, and that, surprisingly, will last the whole season. Now, in the borders, it's a slightly different problem. The ultimate, I suppose, is to use this stuff before you plant. It's a woven nylon material, and you put it down, cut slits in it, and plant through it. I am not too keen on this method because it means you can't get any organic matter in the soil afterwards. So I would much prefer to use an organic mulch. Now, you could use something like bark, but much better, hire a shredder and shred up all your own prunings. But the one really important thing to remember with mulches is that before you put it down, the soil must be moist. So the sooner you get it done, the better. The water that comes off your roof will, of course, not cost you a penny, so every gardener should have a water butt. Just for the look of it, I prefer the wooden one, but there are plenty of good plastic ones around as well, and these you can actually link together so that you can really catch quite a lot. You can also fit one of these devices to your downpipe, and that will fill up the water butts without actually overflowing it. And we should also, of course, be recycling our bath water and the washing up water too, though not the water from your washing machine or the dishwasher. And the Severn Trent Company at least tell me that if you siphon water out of your bath using a hosepipe, they won't prosecute. Now, the next thing, of course, you have to turn your attention to is putting the water exactly where it's wanted. The most inefficient way to water the garden is with a sprinkler. It waters, of course, indiscriminately, and there's a lot of evaporation too. Bear in mind also that you will need a licence for it, and in some areas that will cost you money. In other areas, you actually need to have a meter fitted. Now, the fitting is free, but the water is quite expensive. An average family uses about 54 pence worth of water per day. A sprinkler like that will use 54 pence worth an hour, so you have to think carefully. A much better bet is to use a soaker hose. Now, this one will spray out water all the way along its length, so you can wind it through the border and put the water exactly where you want it. Even better is to actually turn it over so that the water goes directly into the soil. And then, of course, you get no evaporation and no waste at all. An alternative is to use a seep hose, and that seeps out droplets of water all the way along its length, so there's very little waste there too. And you can even get little trickle irrigation systems so that you can deliver a droplet of water right by the plant, and that is particularly good for hanging baskets and containers. And the next thing that you have to consider is the sort of plants that you grow. Plants from hot, dry areas like the Mediterranean are, of course, well used to drought. And here in my Mediterranean garden, I'm doing a lot of replanting. Ironically, because I lost a lot of stuff due to excess winter wet coupled with the cold. So I'm replacing now with plants like this cistus, for example, which comes from the Mediterranean and is a perfect plant for drought conditions. In fact, all the plants with grey leaves are particularly good. Things like lavenders, alerias and artemisias will all do very well. But give them a good watering before you plant, and keep an eye on them and keep them moist until they've actually rooted in. Then they'll look out for themselves. And, of course, mulch afterwards with a bit of gravel, which not only looks good, but will also help to retain water too. Well, one country that doesn't seem to have any problems at all with lack of water is Holland. And last week, Anthony Henn went there to have a look at the bulb fields.
It's astonishing to imagine that last autumn there was about 6 million bulbs planted by a team of 20 or 30 avid gardeners to produce the wonderful displays that we know and love so well. Now, last year there was about 1 million visitors. This year I'm going to be one of them.
Believe it or not, these were once the kitchen gardens of a royal castle. But in 1949 it was transformed to highlight the expertise of 40 local growers. It is now the showcase for the Dutch bulb industry.
Wonderful thing for me coming to Keukenhof is there's always new varieties coming on the market. Now, this tulip is called Treasure, and it really is a treasure. Look at that superb flower, and just the right height as well. Now, they've underplanted this with this anemone, which is just coming into its own. It looks absolutely brilliant. An added bonus is the multi-headed tulip. We've got another flower coming on the bottom here. Isn't it a shame they're all going to get thrown away in a month?
It's horrifying to think that each year all the bulbs are discarded. The designers then have to go back to the drawing board to create new and exciting schemes for the following season. Even the grass is resown, using 6.5 tons of seed to complete the picture. Keukenhof is also the shop window for new varieties, and growers are always thinking of the future. Willem Lienen's family has been growing and hybridizing daffodils for generations.
At the moment I'm selecting out new varieties for hybridization. Shall I show you how I hybridize?
I'd love to see that, yeah.
Yes. What I do, I just open the flower and then you see the male part of the flower by the pollen which is around the flower. Then I search for a flower like here and I look to the female part which is sticking out there. Then I get the male part and brush it like this onto the flower. And if that's done, then I'll wait for about 3 weeks, and after these 3 weeks this starts to swell. And this is where the new seeds start to develop. For us it's to say that the pollination has been taking place well.